Come on down, Ed. You made it.
Yeah.
I think I know what it is.
Yeah.
I think I got a good idea on what's going on. You were saying it was while the engine was running, and it was sort of like a groaning, a squealing.
Groaning. And it was loud. It was a substantial.
Yeah.
I thought it was the car next to me.
Yeah. Is it kind of like, did it kind of sound like a fog buoy, like a, or just like a moaning noise like that?
Yes.
Gotcha. All right, I think I have a decent idea on what's going on. So on these engines, on this 6-cylinder, inside the valve cover, there's what's called a CCV system, crankcase ventilation. And basically what it does is it regulates the vacuum being drawn through the engine. And sometimes when they fail, it causes excess engine vacuum, and the engine will actually start sucking outside air through the engine seals, through the front crank seal and through the rear main. And the air passing through those seals from all that high vacuum causes almost like a howling noise. So that's what, based off your description, that's my first guess. That's what I think it is. You can hear the vacuum release.
Yeah.
So it does feel a little bit stronger. So what we'll do is we'll pop this oil cap off, just take that ring off, throw this on, put this on here. So right now it's just a little bit higher. Our spec for the N52 engine is going to be right around 30. It's 37, but also the car isn't acting up like you really heard it howling before, you know? So maybe I'll play around with the RPMs real quick and just see if we can sort of get it to act up, and we can monitor that number and see if it increases at all. What I'll do too is I'll do a little bit further testing.
Yeah.
Once it gets a little colder, because while it's hot, maybe that plastic expanded a little bit and maybe that breather isn't acting up. But other than that, I have a strong suspicion it'll probably be that valve cover. So what you do is you end up just taking this plastic cover piece off, all this will come out, and instead of just replacing a valve cover gasket like you would a leak, we're going to replace the entire cover. Because it has an integrated breather assembly inside of it. What's nice is it doesn't look like we have any other check engine lights or any other warnings on the dash, which is a good sign. Yeah, we'll put her up in the air. We'll do an overall inspection. Once the car cools down, we'll check all the fluids, make sure nothing's low.
Alec, I want to thank you. It's just rare that you can sit down with a mechanic and have a personal discussion on what it is. Usually,
hey, no problem.
You drop it off and you go and you have no idea.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of blind faith, but I really enjoyed our interaction last time. It was a treat to get to know you, and you were one of the very first customers that came here and gave me support here at the home shop. So I'm more than happy to take care of you, and I'll do my best to treat you as good as possible and to treat your car good as well. I got the key, and then you were saying the trunk doesn't like to open with the switch?
Yeah.
What happens,
well, I've been using the door.
if it'll open with the remote and not the switch, what happens is this loom right here runs from the trunk switch down into the wiring harness into the car, and sometimes wires in here break.
Wow.
And they separate. So what I can do is I'll pull this loom back and I'll check all the wires and see if we can find a broken one. If we can, then I can solder and connect it back together, and we can get that trunk switch working again for you. So this will be your driver.
All right.
Help yourself. The car's all yours. Keys in the ignition.
Fantastic.
Back seat's clear. Throw whatever you need in there.
Very good. Thank you, Alec.
No problem. So this is Ed's brother's book. He just released it. It's an Amazon bestseller. So Ed wanted to show me that, and I want to show you guys that. So if you guys are readers, check it out.
Thank you much.
Safe driving, Ed. We'll talk soon. Ed's gonna be ripping the 335i. Let's go. Come here. Oh, good girl. Good girl. All right, gang. We got a 2008 328xi. This thing needs a lot of work. We got a washer fluid low warning. Time and date keeps getting erased. We have an SOS call system malfunction. We have a couple services due. Then we have a daytime running light bulb that is out. As far as service requirements on the CBS, it is due for a vehicle check, it's due for a brake fluid flush, and it's due for an oil service. Let's plug into ISTA first and see what we got for faults. It sounds like he was describing to me a transmission gear light, so I want to see what's going on with that. And then we'll do a full inspection on this thing, figure out where we go from there. There's our bulb that's out. It's a passenger side halo. This thing only has 66,000 miles on it. That is insane. So for faults, we got quite a few. DME crankshaft, exhaust camshaft reference, DME camshaft sensor inlet signal, coolant temp sensor. We have a EWS fault, under voltage for the DSC, steering angle sensor plausibility, brake fluid level too low. That one's an old one. Couple under voltage faults, battery exhausted, short circuit fault. A lot of these are going to be due to the fact that he had to jump his car. Other than that, I'm not seeing anything related to the VTG, which is basically the transfer case system. I think it's best if we clear these out and just start with a nice clean slate since this battery went under, and we'll put a battery tender on it. But before we do that, let's just go here, service functions, powertrain. Here we go. Body, voltage supply, battery, evaluate battery state of charge. ABL, we'll go into the test plan. So last 3 days, rest phase was too short. 41%, 44, 38. So battery's low, it needs recharging. Charging status history. All right, it's been pretty low. All right, let's start with a thorough inspection on this thing. We'll pull out this air duct. I wanna get the microfilter assembly off too so I can visually inspect this valve cover. We'll check the front end, serpentine belt assembly, all that. Then we'll get down underneath and see what's going on over there.
A few minutes later.
What the hell? Sorry, Ed, I'm throwing that away. That cabin filter is getting a little gross. We do have a lot of oil over here on top of the valve cover. Let me show you. So you can see down here by the ignition coils, we have oil pooling up down underneath the Valvetronic motor. And I believe it's coming out of this eccentric shaft seal. Either way, even if it's not the cause of our howling noise, this valve cover gasket needs to be replaced. And it's better just to replace these entire valve cover assemblies than to peel the gasket out and do it, because this plastic gets old and brittle. And you can also just refresh the Valvetronic motor, the eccentric shaft sensor seal, and just do it all at once. Another thing that's common on these N52s is these eccentric shaft sensors will actually leak oil internally. If you look down here, you can actually see oil inside the eccentric shaft sensor, and they tend to come out from the pins on that sensor there and then bleed into the wiring harness. So it's a good idea whenever you're in here on the valve covers is to pop that sensor out and see if there's any oil in there. The solution is to replace the eccentric shaft sensor, but it does get a little pricey. Now for the oil filter housings, I like to take an inspection mirror and check that seam, and it is bone dry, baby. You know why? Because I replaced that oil filter housing gasket. Also, this tensioner looks perfect. The belt isn't walking off. When these tensioners fail, this belt starts to walk off that pulley and it can cause big problems, but that's still in good shape. Over here, I'm starting to see a little bit of sign of a coolant leak coming from this overflow hose. I do feel that the hose clamp is a little loose. I think I might have been the one to replace this, so I'm gonna go through and clean this up and re-secure that hose clamp and then pressure test it and see if that doesn't seal it up. The car's cooled down enough. Let's check the expansion tank level. I wanna see if it's been leaking any coolant. And we're down a little bit, so it's probably just due to that expansion tank hose. We'll see if there's any leaks on the bottom. Let's check the power steering bottle real quick. We're looking for some clear fluid. It is pretty darn black and milky, so I would recommend a power steering flush plus a new bottle. The filter is integrated into the bottle, so you replace it then. Brake fluid, we had a fault in ISTA, brake fluid being too low. Brake fluid flush is due in CBS, so we'll recommend that as well. You can see that power steering bottle is starting to leak down onto that intake hose, so we don't want that oil to deteriorate any other hoses down there. So in total, jobs we need to recommend on the top end: valve cover replacement. That breather has failed. It's causing excess engine crankcase vacuum. The Valvetronic motor gasket right here is also leaking down in between the ignition coils, and the eccentric shaft sensor seal is leaking down into the ignition coils. Plus we have oil inside that connector. So when we have the valve cover off, we need to replace that eccentric shaft sensor. Over here, we have a slight leak at the expansion tank hose. We have a little bit of blue crust there. I think this was replaced by me last visit. So we'll pull that off. We'll clean up the connection, throw on a new hose clamp, get it nice and tight, and we'll try to reseal that for Ed. We'll recommend a power steering flush with a new bottle because the filter is integrated into the power steering bottle, and we'll recommend a brake fluid flush as well. Now, things to look out for on these cars. You can see all that chew mark back there. That's actually from mice nesting inside of this car. Also, if you look right here too, looks like we have some chew marks here on this Mickey Mouse hose. So what I'm gonna try to do is recommend some preventatives to Ed so we can try to keep these mice out of the car. You can see we can almost start to see some braided hose right there showing through that tear. So it might be a good idea to replace this hose preemptively. We'll probably hold off right now just to save on money, but we will note it to Ed. We need to try to keep those mice out of this engine bay. As far as the undercarriage goes on this thing, it is surprisingly dry. The oil pan gasket is dry, transmission's dry. I don't see anything down here that I need to recommend, except for one thing. If you look right over here, you see that staining? That's actually fluid leaking out of the control arm bushing. So let's grab a pry bar, throw it on there, see if we have any play. The other side does not have this brown staining, but when you see that brown staining on these control arms, guys, that means the bushing is actually leaking. Yes, they are fluid filled. I think we have bigger fish to fry this visit, so we're gonna note it, but these don't need to be replaced right away. We need to focus on the valve cover and eccentric shaft sensor, but boy, that is just so nice to see. You know, these oil pans can be so labor intensive on the XIs. You have to pull the front differential, the front drive shaft, the CV axles. It's like a 12-hour oil pan job. So I'm just super pumped I don't have to recommend that to Ed for the future. All right, let's pull this tire off. We need to get into the fender well so we could diagnose this washer pump. We need to check the brakes too. I almost forgot. None of the sensors are cut, so they're probably still good. That's an old impact gun hammer right there. Brakes look good. Got a little life on them left. Probably about 6mm. Here's a little BMW hack for you. Buy yourself a small inspection mirror so you can check brakes while the wheels are still on. What you want to do is you want to look in this cavity back here inside the caliper, and you want to check the inside pad width. You never really want to go off just the outside pad width, because that inside pad takes all the force from the piston, and in 90% of cases, the inside pad wears down before the outside pad. So it's always good to go off the inside. Just like this. Go in, check that inside one. That sensor's almost cut. We're at about 4mm in the front, so we're gonna wait. He doesn't drive that much, but he will need brakes soon, probably next visit. Same here on the rears. Yep, just about 4mm. That sensor's gonna cut soon, so I would call that 20% life left. I think a brand new brake pad's usually around 14mm thickness, I think. So we're gonna save him the money this trip. You'll have to invest in it next visit, I think. All right, now we need to get these fender pieces taken out so we can get access to the washer pump. There's a little push pin down here. Take that fender liner out. Now, like I was telling Ed, the windshield washer reservoir tucks into this fender here. And what you do before trying to get that washer reservoir out, take this side marker out and just flop it out of the way like that, because it always catches when you try to slide this reservoir out. So just take it out of the equation. Next, there's one more 10mm up here. Pull that 10mm out, and then this reservoir should be able to come out. Might need to disconnect this loom right here just to give ourselves a little more access, and we might want to disconnect the hose. Give ourselves a little bit more room too. Oh yeah, this loom is attached to the side marker, so let's just disconnect that completely. And we just want to slide this reservoir out. Oh, you know what? It's got a line that goes up to the headlight washers too. So this has a little bit more advanced system, but I think we can slide it out just enough to right there. That's perfect. So back here we have our windshield level sensor. It's a little float that goes up and down. And then this is going to be the pump for your normal windshield sprayer. This is going to be the pump for your headlight sprayer. What we're trying to do is we want to see if that screen, there's a little mesh screen on the bottom of this pump. We want to see if it's clogged. So let's pop this line off. Yeah, see? It's trickling out good there. We should have steady flow out of the pump, but it's not steadily flowing. Let's take this out like this. Look at that. Look at all that goop. Now, if you look here, there's just a giant booger on the bottom of that screen, that pickup, just like I thought. But yeah, that's what happens, guys, when you use windshield washer additive. So I like to use just straight water so it doesn't congeal and clog up your pumps like this. All right, this is the best part. Let's see if we can pick out the booger. I wasn't very satisfying, so let's plug in this hose. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set you guys up right here so you can watch, and I'm gonna throw some water down that windshield reservoir hose and flush that out. Oh, disgusting. Oh my God. I'm gonna have to take this reservoir out completely. There's gotta be more junk floating around in there, and we'll have to completely flush this thing. Plus, I just noticed the nose of this thing is completely busted off, so we could let it ride, but something got into this thing and rubbed it and chafed it and broke it completely open. So I'll throw it in the quote, and we'll let Ed know. 100% the screen for this one's gotta be plugged up too, so we'll have to take that out. I think I have some spare screens, but you can just spray these out with brake cleaner and clean them up. Now, before my camera dies and we call it a day, I wanna do a little bit of diagnostics here on the trunk. The trunk switch is no longer working. Now, E46s are known for the wiring harness inside here breaking. I asked my buddy Mario, he says it happens sometimes on the E90s too. What I like to do to diagnose it is I peel this harness boot out of the way, then I get access down to these wires, just slip that down and out of the way, and I do a wire tug test. I pull this way, I pull that way on every single wire just to see if there's any that are broken. Phone's ringing. I had to take a quick phone call. Totally lost my spot on the tug test, but let's just go through every single one again. And I just like to tug this way, away from the trunk, and then tug away from the body. And usually, if you have a broken wire in there, you can feel it come loose and it'll separate. This is what happens sometimes with intermittent trunk light issues, or sometimes on E46s, license plate lights go out, but the bulb is perfectly fine. These harnesses like to break sometimes. And so I just give them a little tug. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a good, easy starting point. So inconclusive on the tug test. What I'm gonna do is when Ed brings my E90 back, I'll probably just switch out the trunk switches. And if putting in my trunk switch works on his car, then I know it's the trunk switch issue, and we'll just order up a trunk switch. Yeah, it's all feeling tight so far.
The next day.
Good morning. Next day, we are doing a little bit of daytime running light diagnosis. I just wanted to confirm that it was the bulb that was out. And now that the car is cool, before I call Ed and get this entire estimate build up, we need to confirm that that breather has failed. So let's throw the manometer back onto the valve cover. Then we're gonna fire this thing up cold and see what type of vacuum readings we have at the oil cap. And what you do is you take the oil cap and then go right here to this arrow, lift that ring off. Now this is a custom tool for my days working at the BMW shop. It's an old oil cap. And what you do is you drill it out and you install a nipple and epoxy that in. That way we can connect it up to our manometer. And what this does is this is a vacuum reading device. So we're gonna turn it on, we're gonna have it set to millibar. I'm gonna put the camera right on it, then we'll go fire this thing up. Hopefully we can get that noise that Ed was talking about. All right, here we go. Dang it, this thing's probably gonna need a battery too, sadly. You throw the jump pack on here. I'll have to get into the back and check to see how old the battery is. I don't remember if I replaced it last visit or not. Let's try again. That's pretty high. We were seeing 37 yesterday. Yeah, that's a lot of vacuum. And if you don't have a manometer, you can just lift the cap like this. You can hear all that vacuum releasing out of the cap there. So I think it is a failed breather. And here you can see N52, our spec is at 30 millibar. And if you guys are curious, I did attach this entire form into my community section on my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to copy this paper for your standards and for your BMWs, it has everything from M52s, M54s, S62, S54, N52, all the way down to Mini Cooper variants too. See if I can get access to the battery real quick. And that will conclude the inspection. And I'll be able to call Ed up, get an estimate built out. Got some PBRs back here, brother. Yee-hoo! All right, it's a Die Hard. I don't see a battery date on it though, but he's just not driving this car enough, and the batteries are just gonna keep failing. You know, you gotta put miles on these things or the batteries they don't last very long at all. Well, I'd say that's good enough for a solid diagnosis. I'm gonna see if I replace this battery. The last time I worked on this car, I'll have to check my last video, see, but you know, he had to jump the car and he keeps losing the clock and date. And so based on the fact that we were seeing 43 millibar as opposed to yesterday's 37, and talking to my buddy Mario, he said even 37 is too high. So the fact that I saw it creeping up, I could feel super heavy vacuum at that oil cap. We're gonna go ahead with the valve cover. It's also leaking too, and I'm gonna recommend that eccentric shaft sensor. So now it's time to go get that estimate built up, and I'm gonna throw the battery tender on the car. And before we get the estimate fully built out too, I want to this cover is loose. I don't like that. That means there could have potentially been water intrusion down into the DME box. These should always be locked in place, especially living in a wet climate like this. It's just a recipe for disaster. I don't think I opened this up last time it was here. Just hope there's no water intrusion. Looks dry in there, but it's definitely a good thing that we opened it up and caught it. I'm gonna pull the connectors out for the wiring harness because I wanna see if that eccentric shaft sensor is starting to push any oil up into the DME connections. Make sure that the key is out of the vehicle. You definitely don't want the ignition on when you're disconnecting DME. And great sign, it looks dry. Let's check the other side. You know, oil will follow electrical wires. If it starts to leak and that eccentric shaft sensor starts pushing oil, it'll trace the lume all the way back to the DME. And No oil in there, so that's good. Okay, now I can confidently recommend the eccentric shaft sensor without having to worry about any other potential issues from that oil. Okay. Hey, good afternoon, Ed. How are you?
Good.
Perfect. I finished up the diagnosis on your car last night, and I went through and built out an estimate and a parts list today, and I have all that ready for you. However, I wanted to ask, are you available today, and are you interested in coming by so we can go through the vehicle in person? I figured it might be a little bit easier to wrap your head around some of the repairs, and I can explain things to you a little bit easier if I can give you a good visual representation rather than just throwing a bunch of words and numbers at you over the phone or through the email.
Yeah, no, I can get myself down there shortly.
Okay, perfect.
Catch you in a bit.
All right, sounds good. I'll keep an eye out for you and I'll be ready. Waiting for Ed to come, checking manometer readings. I just realized this guy's got a silver line aftermarket exhaust on this 328i. What a badass, dude. No wonder why this thing sounds so mean. Also, I just checked the old footage, the old video I did with Ed, and I replaced the battery 2 years ago in December of 2022. He's just not driving this thing enough, so as opposed to replacing the battery, maybe we should just pull it out and take it to O'Reilly and have him charge it overnight. We can slap it back in. I'm gonna propose that idea to him. While we wait for Ed, let's get all these pine needles in here cleaned up.
Magical.
Okay.
Boy, you've been at it.
I've been after it. I took off all the covers.
Wow.
I did some further electrical testing. So when you turn the car on, it'll say, you know, service due negative 1,000, 2,000 miles, things like that. The vehicle is due for 3 services through there. One of them is the oil service, which I have built out in the quote for you. The second one is a brake fluid flush. We did it 2 years ago. And so while you're here, and I remember, let's test the fluid real quick.
Okay.
If the fluid's still good, I want to just reset the light for you. And so what this is a brake fluid moisture tester.
Oh, okay.
So we'll place it down into there. 0% for no moisture content present in the brake fluid, all the way up to 3 or 4%. If it's at 3 or 4, it's usually worth replacing at that time. So see, we're only there at below 1%. So now that we've tested it, I'll just reset that light for you, and we don't need to do the brake fluid flush
Correct.
right now. 2 years is a good time to do it. It's usually recommended every 2 years, 30,000 miles, but you haven't put that mileage on the vehicle.
No, I don't drive.
On the note of not driving that much, the car didn't want to start this morning. The battery was tired. I looked through the video of our last repairs, and I replaced that battery with a new die-hard battery. The reason why it's not lasting very long is you're just simply not putting enough miles on the car. So I don't really want to put a new battery in it. It was still up around 11.5 volts. So I did build out a quote for one, but what I think we should do is, while I'm doing the repairs on the vehicle, I want to pull the battery out and we'll just take it to O'Reilly or AutoZone. They have battery charging systems and they usually do it free of charge.
Wow.
And so we'll ask them to just charge it up and put it on a nice slow charge. And that's the reason why your clock and your date has been dropping out on you, because it's getting so down on voltage that it's just losing its memory.
Okay.
All right, so let's delete the battery, and we'll delete the labor for that. We'll delete the brake flush and the labor for that, and we'll also delete the daytime running light. So that leaves us with the valve cover, the eccentric shaft sensor, the power steering flush with the reservoir and fluid, the oil service, and then the 2 filters. I think that is correct. I'll pass that over here to you.
All right.
I put the dots here for only the labor items. So we're only looking at 4.75 hours of labor. So this is actually your subtotal just in parts.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. And if you want to hold off on anything, or if you want to take it in small bites, depending on your financial situation, I don't know it.
Would you take a double legal, 1 ounce gold?
I've never been offered that before.
Numismatic quality.
Wow. I'd like to see it. I don't know what the current value is or anything on it. I'm tempted. I would say if I was in a better financial position where I had a little bit bigger of a nest egg for my savings and rainy day fund, I would absolutely jump on top of it. But I think as of right now, I'm not even in a position to where I can be contributing to my Roth IRA and to stocks and investments.
An idea that.
But let me know how it feels with you via finances, and if the number's too much and we need to take this into small chunks, we can do the valve cover and eccentric, and then do the others. Okay, sounds good.
I like it. It's quality work.
I'm trying to be quality.
I'm amazed. You got a great thing going here.
Thanks. I appreciate the support. You know, I don't know if I ever sent you the link to it, but we had 33,000 views on our old video.
Beautiful.
The video that I did on your car.
Yeah.
It is the next day. I had a wonderful visit with Ed yesterday. We sat down and talked for like 2 hours. We got the estimate approved and dialed in, and now we need to wait on parts. But we have a couple jobs we can knock out while we do wait on those parts. Let's start with this washer pump reservoir. Is there a dead mouse in there? I swear I think there might be a dead mouse in there. Oh my God. Guys, that is a dead mouse that just came out of the washer reservoir. Sage, watch out. The mice chewed through this washer reservoir and then fell down inside, and that is what clogged up his washer pump. That, plus you can see it's dyed all blue from all that additive. Oh, that is so foul. So gross. Okay, so now we need to clean up this bottle. You can see the mice started chewing on it there, chewing on it here. Over here, they chewed that giant hole in it. They chewed up this top. Wow, they chewed up the vent up here. They chewed up this back section. So what I'm gonna do is sort of just clean this up a little bit so we can get a nice clean surface, and then I'm gonna throw some flashing tape over it. Well, it looks like I forgot to press record, but I got it all sealed up with some flashing tape, and I just cut some slits in it, got it folded down nice and flat. So both the mouse holes are sealed up. It doesn't need to be watertight because we're just gonna keep the washer level filled a little bit lower, but at least no more mice can crawl down there and then sit and rot in the bottom of the tank. All right, let's get this thing sprayed out. This is the filter for the headlight washer. Brake cleaner is a disinfectant for rotten rat, right? Luckily, I have a replacement, and it looks like it's the same style. I don't want to pick the dead rotten rat hair out of here, so we'll just put in this replacement screen. All right, let's pre-assemble this thing. Before we put the fender all back in, throw some water in it, see if we got any leaks. All right, she's filled up. We're looking good, no leaks. Let's test out the windshield washers real quick. Nice. All right, now time for the next diagnosis. You can see these angel eyes, these daytime running lights are on and active. On this side, I swapped the bulbs. This side still doesn't work. So I think we don't have power to this connector. First, we're gonna confirm that with the multimeter and then start chasing this circuit backwards. Next day, I was about to jump into the headlight diagnosis again, and then I realized there's a little coolant puddle under Ed's car. Let's investigate. At first I thought, oh, for sure, the hose off the bottom of the expansion tank, but then I looked up. We have wetness inside the seam of the expansion tank. I think this tank is tired. Let's throw some pressure in it. So I just put about 17 PSI into the bottle, and check this out. That seam, it was starting to push coolant. Let's see if we can get a visual confirmation. You can see it now, it's starting to move. Up. There we go. That is a confirmation. There is coolant flowing inside that crack. I just saw a bead run down. Now, these coolant expansion tanks fail quite often. It's actually a two-piece design, top and bottom, and they just start to separate right here at the seam. So on top of warrantying this expansion tank hose, I'm also gonna order up an expansion tank. Now, to diagnose this daytime running light, I checked for power here at the plug. We have no power. Now we're gonna check back here at the connector for the headlight assembly. Check that. We have no voltage. So we still don't have power going to the daytime running light here at this plug. Now this circuit and all the lights in the car receive their power from the FRM, the footwell module. So now let's get access to that down in the driver's side, and we'll check for power out of the module. Now I haven't done one of these in a long time, but I used to replace them quite a bit. What happens is sometimes when you plug into ISTA, it malfunctions and it makes the FRM module fail. It literally like bricks the FRM module. So people would come in for a check engine light diag. We'd plug it into ISTA. Next thing we know, the FRM module fails. All the windows don't work. All the lights don't work. Then we have to replace the FRM and reprogram the car. The dealership used to do them for us for free, but I don't have the ability to program. So let's get access down into this FRM. I think we need to take this kick panel off first. And we should be able to pull this FRM out. So this is the footwell module. I got it pulled out a little bit so I have access. You can see two big harness connections on the back and one harness connection on the front. I think this might be output. I'm gonna try to confirm through wiring diagnosis real quick and then find the right color wire so we can back probe that. Here you can see I got the SSP, the wiring diagram, and ISTA pulled up. Right here is the FRM. Right down here we have the side light, daytime driving light, This is the right headlight. That's it, number 8. And then here we have pin 14, which is a gray plus a yellow coming out of pin 14 on the FRM. I got this kick panel from under the steering wheel removed. Gonna need to get ourselves a little bit more room here. This FRM's pretty buried, but I think now we should be able to get her pulled out, have access to both those harnesses. I think I found the right gray and yellow right there, so I got my back probe connected down into it. I'm gonna plug this back into the FRM and then turn the lights on and check for power at that wire coming out of the FRM. Key on, daytime running lights on, multimeter on. Find ourselves a nice ground right over here in the door jamb, and we have no power. Now what I'll do real quick is let's go over to the engine bay. Hopefully this multimeter with these leads can reach, and we'll check for continuity from between there and the connector at the headlight. Now that we're tapped into the circuit, might as well go through and check. So that means if I go here to pin 1, we should hear a beep, which we do. So that means that the entire wire is good from the FRM all the way up here to the daytime running light. That means we should be able to plug this in. We should get continuity to this yellow pin right here, which we do. So that confirms the diagnosis that we have no power coming out of the FRM to the daytime running light. The bulb is good, the circuit is good, circuit's good from the connector to here. We have a bad FRM causing the daytime running light to not work. So we don't have power coming out of the FRM. All right, half our parts have showed up from FCP Euro. I ordered these on Friday. It showed up today on Monday, which is pretty dang fast. Cabin air filter, oil and filter, centric shaft sensor, CHF 11S power steering fluid, power steering bottle. Then I just went and picked up some hose clamps and some detail brushes because we're gonna detail this thing. I'm gonna start with the power steering flush and bottle replacement. So let's get this air filter box out of here. Unplug the MAF. Now I usually take my fluid extractor and slip it down the bottle on the old E46 style, and I run that all the way down to the pump and I pull all that fluid out. This one has angled inlet and outlet out of the reservoir, so I can't do that. What I'm gonna do, disconnect this hose at the power steering pump, pull it off, let it drain down into a catch pan, then I'll try to get down here and hit that bottom cooler hose, see if I can get some extra fluid out of it. Then we're just gonna slap on a new reservoir and refill the system. And if it still looks cloudy, I'll pull it while the engine's running and pour in more fluid to dilute the old stuff. This other cooler hose is gonna be a little bit trickier. Oh yeah, it came off super easy. It's got that plastic collar on it, and you just push the hose towards the cooler, squeeze that plastic collar down, and then pull backwards. And before I reinstall it, I'm gonna wipe off that cooler neck so there's no dirt getting into that O-ring. Then for these crimp hose clamps, I just stick a screwdriver in there, twist it around, and they pop out. Break these hoses loose. I like to just twist them till the seal breaks. And we need to remove this bracket. And this goes in the trash. And again, there's a filter assembly built into these power steering bottles. So when you do a flush, you want to replace a bottle. Plus this thing was leaking from the cap and from the seam. It was the entire cause of this power steering leak over here. The hoses are completely dry. Test fit some hose clamps. That'll work for that. This one needs one size bigger. Let's clean up our bracket. Old bracket goes on our new bottle. Now we get our new bottle fitted onto our hoses. Looks good. One more hose clamp down below where I pulled it off the power steering pump. This will be your suction line where the power steering pump pulls from up to the bottle. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Now we just refill. Gonna use this bottle of old fluid I have laying around first. This stuff is pretty damn expensive. It was like 25, almost 30 bucks a bottle. I'm gonna overfill it because when we fire this thing up and the pump starts to run, it's gonna push all the air bubbles out of this system, and this thing's really gonna drink a lot more fluid. Gonna hit this area down here with just some simple green, little degreaser, just to cut through all that power steering fluid I spilled. Now we can split this air filter box open. Quite a bit of junk in there. Not able to see light through it. New man air filter, air box, give it a little tap, get the debris out. Now underneath this air box is this little rubber schnubber. It falls out often when you take the air box out. So look around the engine bay for it. Make sure it's down there in place on that little frame rail. Plug in the MAF, pop the intake hose back on. Make sure the intake boot is fully seated. Connect our vacuum line. Nice. Before we fire it up, do the power steering, let's do an oil service real quick. Oil cap up, bust our filter loose. You want to do this slowly so you can let the oil drain out of the cartridge. And mine's about to dump oil because I was too impatient. It's because the filter stayed in place. The filter didn't come out with the cap. There we go. Now it'll drain down. We didn't make too much of a mess. Drain plug's way back here because it's an XI. Torque spec, good and tight. I'm not responsible if you over torque your own drain plug. I know what tight's supposed to feel like. All right, now we pick the old O-rings off the filter. The O-ring's a little wet. New filter. Till it pops. For oil, we're running this Fuchs. I used to buy this stuff at the old shop I worked at. It's OE on FCP Euro's website. It's good stuff. I used to use it all the time. Look at that little tear tab. The spec that you want for BMW oil, BMW Long Life 04. That's what you want. All right, let's fire it up. Now, once I fire this thing up, the power steering pump's gonna start screaming, so we gotta get fluid in it. Once we turn the wheel, fluid will bleed down a little bit, I think. Check the level, perfect. Now this thing's got a little bit of a top end tick. It happens when these N52s sit for a while and they lose oil pressure up to the top end. I'm gonna give it a couple minutes to warm up. Then I'm gonna hold the RPMs up around like 3,000 to 4,000 for a couple minutes. Usually builds up enough oil pressure to get back up to the top end. Should quiet things down. This thing's got a mean exhaust on it. Ed's a badass. She's still a little noisy, but she'll go away after we drive it later. Now, Ed asked for a detail, and I want the man to be happy, so got a big empty box here. We're gonna start gutting the interior on this thing, but we're gonna do a deep clean on this thing. I'm gonna hit all the carpets with a carpet cleaner, probably use my new fluid extractor and steamer, try to get this thing looking nice for him again. I'm gonna try to use my discretion on what should be kept and what should be thrown away. Little piece of driftwood. This man is a driftwood hunter. He finds pieces of driftwood on the beach here on the North Coast, and he cleans them up, seals them up with polyurethane, and he makes all types of custom walking sticks and all different types of cool driftwood pieces. All right, she's pretty well cleaned out. Look at all these crunchies we get to suck up. This is gonna be satisfying. We got straight up puddles under the pedals here. I wanna keep the seat in for now so the car is drivable tomorrow if parts don't show up and I need to get other stuff in the garage. But ultimately, I'm going to probably pull the seats and scrub all the carpet. But for now, let's just give this thing a good vacuum, working around the seats and get started that way. Then I'm gonna call it a night. It's like 8 o'clock. Some new parts showed up today for Ed's 128XI. We got a new expansion tank, a cap, a bottle of coolant, and an expansion tank hose. We're still waiting on the valve cover, but let's get this cooling system fixed up. First thing I'm gonna do is pull out as much coolant as I can with my fluid extractor. If you don't have one of these, it is so helpful in the garage. I'll put a link for one in the description for you guys for Amazon. Now I can pop the clip up on my expansion tank hose, take that connector off. Next hose connection is right down here at the bottom. And I got a drip pan underneath there too, because it's still gonna have a little bit of coolant that we couldn't evacuate. Knock out these two 10s. And then there's a little connector back here for the coolant level float. Got our new expansion tank, came with a float level sensor. I'm just gonna spray these connections down with just a touch of silicone spray, just so those O-rings slide on a little bit easier. Plug that bottom one on. Now I'm eating the cost in replacing this expansion tank hose under warranty. I don't really have a warranty to apply to my work here at the home shop, but you know, I replaced it 2 years ago. I was the last person that touched it. He paid good money for it, so I want to take good care of my customers. Now I'm not going to lube this nipple up because it's pretty sensitive and I don't want the rubber hose sliding on it when I put the hose clamp on, but I will lube up this connection here on the other side on the expansion tank. I always replace these expansion tank hoses anytime I do the uppers. Plus they just go bad and fail. You want to be careful tightening these up. You don't want to break the nipple on that upper hose. I tighten it to where I can't spin it left and right. And we'll put some pressure in the system, make sure that's nice and tight. All right, now it's time to fill this thing up, do the initial fill, then we'll pressure test it and bleed it. When I fill these, I just like to take the bleed screw out right here and I'll fill it up with coolant until I get a nice steady trickle out of there. Throw the screw back down, then pressure test and bleed. Just like that, I got coolant all the way up to the bleed screw there, so that'll be plenty fine. Snug it up with the big flat head. Don't want to over torque those. Now let's put some pressure in it and confirm that we are good. I like to put about 16 PSI in. It's usually a good safe number to show leaks. and we'll just let that sit for a little while, make sure that needle doesn't drop. And I like to just look underneath the car, make sure there's no drips. No, what is that? We got a leak. Yep, we got a leak somewhere. Pressure's dropped about a PSI. So right there is the seam for the thermostat. Right now it's not leaking. I released the pressure. I'm about to get the pressure up to 16, and you're gonna see that seam right there develop a coolant leak. There it goes. That is a confirmed coolant leak diag on that thermostat now too. Oh, man, sometimes it's just one thing after the other with these cars, you know? First, I just warrantied the expansion tank hose, and then I was running the car and I noticed the tank was leaking. So now we're doing the tank and the hose. And now I'm pressure testing it to confirm my work, and now the thermostat's leaking. Honestly, it's good that we catch it now while I have it and I can get it repaired, but it just sucks to be the messenger to the customer sometimes when these issues keep coming up and it's just like, hey, just a heads up, it's gonna be more money, you know? It sucks. So I just got off the phone with Ed. He is totally understandable. I told him let's hold off on the detail for now so I don't have to charge him for that. He was understanding, and we're still gonna give him a bit of a complimentary detail on the car. I'm not gonna do fluid extraction and steam cleaning on the carpets and pull out the seats, but I'll still vacuum it all out for him, give him a quick brief wipe down, and then we'll do a nice wash on the exterior before we give it back to him. So good news, just got more work to do. It's dinner time for the doggies. Sage has got a cup of food and a fresh chicken egg and some supplements. And this big old boy is Bear. You guys have seen him on the channel before. He's my brother's dog. I'm watching him for a couple days while brother's out of town. Well, we're set back even more. We're still waiting on the valve cover. We're still waiting on the thermostat assembly. I guess I can finish cleaning up these floor mats a little bit, then we'll throw them back in the car and do a little interior clean tonight, maybe. What's up, cuties? Who's the cuties? Huh? Who's the cuties? Cheers. Let's get this interior cleaned up. Got some trim clean for the plastics, some leather cleaner for the seats. I'm not doing a detail, guys, just trying to get all the dirt and dust off the seats real quick. Well, we got a nice little spit shine on the car. We got the trunk cleaned up. We got the interior cleaned up, kick panels, all that jazz. There's not much I can do until the valve cover assembly and the thermostat shows up. So I'll see you guys when I get some parts. Well, it's time to get back to work. Our thermostat is here. Our coolant hose O-ring is here. I've done these thermostat and water pumps before on these N52s, but the X-Drive makes it a little bit more difficult. All that front drivetrain assembly is in the way. So let's get down there, let's get the coolant out of it, and I'll try to show you guys the process as best I can. Sadly, we got to waste some of our coolant after we did the expansion tank replacement, but that's just how cooling system repairs go. I'm gonna get some coolant pulled, and now I'm gonna work on getting this electric cooling fan out of here. Try to reduce coolant spillage as much as possible. So here's a quick look at the thermostat with the orientation of installation. We have the main lower hose there, another quick connect, bolts up down over here. We got a plug and then 2 hose clamp connections here in the back. And if you look right down here, you can see the main lower hose connection and that secondary one. So I like to do these from up top, take a pick tool, pop the little tabs up and then pop those off with a catch pan underneath. And then for the rest of them, I do down below. So that's what I'm gonna focus on first. Here's one. All right, those 2 hoses are off. Gonna let that drain for a sec just so I'm not getting coolant dripping in my face. Pull this wheel, give myself a little bit more daylight. So here's a look at the bottom side, disconnected. We have our 2 mounting bolts right there and then one behind, but it's blocked by this X-Drive subframe. So I'm gonna sneak a wobble head ratcheting wrench up there, try to knock those 2 out. There's a connector for the thermostat right back in there. And then for our hose clamps, there's one right there for the smaller hose and one right there for the larger hose. So that's the game plan. Knock out the 2 hose connections, pull out the 2 10s, unplug it, try to sneak it out, sneak the new one in. Now for these thermostats, I really like a ratcheting screwdriver with a 1/4-inch head on it. I really also like this Wobble 1/4-inch little hand driver. And then another great tool for these is a Wobble 6mm socket. BMW uses 6mm on all their factory hose clamps. And with this combination right here, you can really get in tight spots for hose clamps. Got the connector out, and I got a long swivel head 10mm ratcheting wrench. Hopefully we can get up there and get those bolts out. Got it broken free, but unscrewing it by hand is a whole nother story. So you can fit the Wobble in there through that little hole. All right, second bolt is out. Now we gotta break these hose connections and get this thing out of the car. That's a whole different story. Radiator pick tools are great for breaking the hose connections loose. Where's that other one? I'm gonna see if I can make some progress from the top. There's one of them. One more hose. We got it. Now we got to get the new one in. This hose is the toughest. The old water pump has a marking on it where this hose is supposed to line up. This new one doesn't. So I got to clock it in the correct position. It's something like that. Again, this is sort of a freebie job for Ed. You know, coolant leaks just showed up as we were diagnosing this car and running it, and I pressure tested it, and at 16 PSI, the body of this thermostat was leaking. So I can't, in good conscience, set Ed down the road with a potential future coolant leak that's gonna come get him. Looks like it's cocked properly. Now I'm gonna go up and fit that rear hose on. And this big chonky hose goes from the water pump to the thermostat. All right, let's check if that hose is flush. Looks and feels flush. Try to knock out that clamp real quick. Non-X drives, this job really isn't that bad, but X drive makes everything harder. Okay, it's going pretty smooth. I'm telling you guys, those Wobble 6mm sockets are just such a game changer on BMWs. They help so much with just all these little jobs. Now we gotta try to get these 10 mils back in. Barely got enough room to get my hand in there. I think that's a good start. Don't fall out. Don't be cross-threaded. All right. Now this front one's gonna help me line up that back one because that's gonna be the real problem child. So I'm just gonna barely snug it. Hopefully I got nice alignment on that back bolt. Sneak my little fingies back there. Front is tight. Thermostat's plugged in. Lubing the connection for the lower hose. Now I'm attempting to swap out the O-ring for the slightly smaller hose that comes off the expansion tank. I ordered a new one. Okay, let's pop this hose on. Nice. Let's pop the lower. Boom. We're done. Let's get this drain petcock back in there. Cooling fan can go back in. Usually got to wiggle the auto trans thermostat to get it out of the way to get these to fully drop. And then go down below, check the tabs for the bottom of the cooling fan, make sure it's fully seated. Good, good. Put our Torx in for the auto trans thermostat. Torx for the fan. Next is expansion tank hose. And then the plug for the electric fan goes over the expansion tank hose. All right, now we can fill the cooling system. Please, no more leaks. Okay, there's 16 PSI. Let's throw the tire back on, let that marinate. Fantastic news, we are holding at 16 PSI. Also, I got some other good news for you guys. Let me show you. Driver's side daytime running lamp, passenger side daytime running lamp. I fixed the FRM. Now, a viewer of mine named FA reached out to me on Instagram. He's from Turkey. He's 20 years old and he is an absolute coding whiz. He helped me out with my laptop with Tool 32 and we successfully reset the short circuit counter. We used iTool Radar and then locked out the icon with Easy Connect, and then we went into Tool 32 and we went into the FRM, into the coding, and executed a function to clear all the short circuit counter resets inside the FRM. So I'd love to show you guys a tutorial on how to use Tool 32 and to reset the FRM short circuit counter, but I'm not knowledgeable enough on the software yet. I was taken through it as a tutorial while someone was in my PC remotely, but I am working with a couple people who are putting a professional service together that can offer those services to you guys and help you out with installation for ISTA, for Tool 32, ordering the right ICOMs, and then some tutorials on exactly how to use them. So I can't give you that information yet, but I am working on it for you guys. And on top of that, the Instagram is at 92,000 followers now. Guys, I was at 3,800 followers, 3,800 followers like a little over a week ago. And then I've been doing a daily posting series, showing different problems on BMWs, trying to share information, and the Instagram's just been blowing up. So if any of you guys are watching the YouTube that came from Instagram, thank you so much for the support. We got to get everybody over here onto YouTube. YouTube's where it's at. I love the long form. I love being able to hang out with you guys for a long period of time. And I love the dialogue in the comments. Instagram is fun too, don't get me wrong. They're both great platforms, but YouTube's really where my heart lies. So yeah, the FRM is fixed. Looks like the cooling system is dialed in. Let's do the bleed procedure, keep this thing going. Then the last thing we need to do is I'm just waiting on the valve cover. Should show up today Then we can do the eccentric shaft sensor, valve cover, then put this thing back together, get it cleaned up, set tire pressures, deliver it to Ed. And one more thing too, once we get this YouTube to 100,000 subscribers, we're gonna do another car giveaway. If it's not one of the vehicles that I have now, I will go out, I will buy a car, I will fully restore it, and we'll do another giveaway series, I promise. I'm gonna throw the trickle charger on the battery posts here, and we'll go inside and do the electronic bleed. All right, so we go ignition on. I like to go defrost, but I made a video on this on Instagram yesterday. Someone told me I didn't have to, but it kind of feels like more fun when you do it because it's like an extra combo point. But anyways, ignition on, defrost, power level 1, max heat, accelerator all the way to the floor, hold it for 10 seconds. Someone commented yesterday, Mortal Kombat combo type finisher coolant bleed. And I just thought that was hilarious. I don't think you have to do the defrost, but it's more fun when you get to press more buttons and make it a full-on combo. Once the bleed procedure is activated, you're gonna see a little stream of coolant coming out of there. It's gonna ramp up at a few different speeds, and then after about 5 minutes or so, it'll shut off, and then we can evacuate to the proper level, throw the cap on, and we're done. But yeah, this is the bleed procedure for, I believe, N20s, N51s, N52s, N54s, N55s, everything that uses the electronic water pump. It may vary a little bit different, might be different in Europe or in other countries, I'm not sure, but that's the procedure I go through anytime I need to bleed the cooling system. And if it's a little different, you can always access it through ISTA or another scan tool and just command the water pump to do the bleed. All right, we had to fire this thing up because the battery is just draining so hard, but we got enough of a bleed in there. I'm gonna let this thing run for a little bit. I'm gonna start tidying up some loose ends, check all the fluids, tire pressures, and then valve cover, then put this back together, then wash. Right now I'm just resetting the CBS data, so I hold that little button down on the gauge cluster till we get this screen, and then just use the BC button to select, press it once, press and hold to reset. I already did vehicle check. There's brake fluid, we did it 2 years ago, but it's still good. And oil service, all done. Now we can go over here and check it. Info sources, service info, all good, all reset. Engine oil, that is absolutely ludicrous. 22,000 miles per oil service, no way. 5,000 to 7,000 miles max. You can use ISTA and actually go in and correct the CBS data if you want to. And then we'll go up here, check control messages. We still have that telematics unit, which is out. Service due reset will reset when we turn the car off. And date and time keeps getting wiped because the battery's so low. Washed up while we wait for the valve cover. I threw on the microfilter just so we don't get water inside the cab, and then I'm also just gonna throw on this engine cover. That way if any water gets onto the ignition coils, it doesn't swamp them and make them swell up, and just don't wanna have to replace any more parts. Car wash supplies today, we got some Stoner wheel cleaner. We're using the detail brush on the drill technique that I like for cleaning the wheels. We're using some Griot's Garage Car Wash. We got the Stoner Car Care foam cannon, pressure washers dialed in, and we got a microfiber wash mitt. Let's go. Moment we've all been waiting for. The valve cover is finally here. Now before we tear this thing down and throw this in, let me show you something I found real quick. I threw the Autoline Pro Ventus smoke machine on this thing because I wanted to get a confirmation on that breather. I adapted it up to the intake hose with my bladder adapter, and at first I thought the smoke was coming out of this little nipple. Usually does when that breather diaphragm tears. Then I looked down here, let me show you. We're actually leaking smoke down by this 10mm bolt. I threw a socket on it to see if it was loose, and it is tight, so I think we have a cracked valve cover down there. I was actually seeing a little bit of bubbles coming out from underneath that bolt too, so it's a good thing we're replacing this cover. Now it's time to start tearing it down. Now I'm gonna try to be as instructional as I can on this one because I believe this is our first N52 valve cover on the channel. Couple things that I've done to get prepared for it. Microfilter assembly comes out. I took the cover off of the E-box here, and I also removed that strut brace that goes from the strut tower over there to the center of the cowling. All right, let's party. Start by taking this cover off. We got a 13 here that runs to our alternator. Now there is live 12 volts that runs up to this post right here, so be careful not to short your tool out on anything. And a little 10 here for this wiring harness. Once I take these two off, I put the cover back on so I don't accidentally short it out. All right, now we can disconnect that for the Valvetronic motor. Start popping our ignition coils up. pull off the 8 for this ground strap, pull off the 8 for the other. Then it depends if you want to flop it out of the way or get this harness out completely. There's 3 connectors that run up here off to the front to the 2 Vanos solenoids, and then also up to like a oil pressure sensor or something up here to the front. So you can do that if you want. I haven't done one of these in a while, so let's see how loose we can get it. There's little clips here for this ignition coil wiring harness. There's one here, there's this one here. That comes out and up. Then we can unplug this one here and just flop it up. Same with this one. And then this harness can come up and out. Okay, and then over here, we'll disconnect the oil pressure sensor. There's a coolant temp sensor. And then this wire here goes to this bottom Vanos solenoid. And what I do is I take a pry bar and I gently and just lever the connectors off of the fuel injectors. Just like that. And we can flop that up and out of the way. Okay, let's unclip these O2 wires off of our valve cover. Take that clip off there. Pull these O2s. Now I'm gonna take a radiator pick tool or just a regular pick tool, come back here to the PCV connection at the very back of the valve cover. These ones are pretty hard to squeeze, so I just like to take a pick tool and put it inside the clips and manually unlock it. You could try to squeeze it too. Whatever works. Unclip that hose back there, flop it out loosely, just like that. Next up, we got our Valvetronic motor. It's like a little E8 or something right down here. There's 3 bolts for it. And then there's 2 more here on the sides. Now, don't just take one all the way out. Back it out a little bit. Back the other side out a little bit. This thing is under a spring. It's spring loaded. And it's gonna pop like that. The spring's gonna release. Then you can take them out. But you don't just want to send that thing home with an electric ratchet and just take it out super fast. You can do damage to the motor. Okay, I think that is everything. Now we just got to start working on getting all the bolts for the valve cover removed and get this thing out of the car. All right, we got our E10. Let's start gripping and ripping. Now over here, directly below the Valvetronic motor is 2 steel bolts. They're not aluminum. And they can fall out. So pull this one by hand and pull this one by hand and save those. This one's always a little tricky. All right, now we're gonna knock out these bolts that hold the valve cover in on the inside. And if I remember correctly, that should be everything. Now let's take a little screwdriver, come right up here, break that seal loose. See if I can pop this old eccentric shaft sensor seal out. Give ourselves a little bit more room. Putting in a new one anyways. I see, you want to catch on there. I'm going to pull this expansion tank and just flop it out of the way. Let's disconnect this level sensor here on the bottom. And then once I get to here, what I like to do is take a pry bar, and there's this little white lip back here. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bend this windshield cowl up and out of the way a little bit, just to get that PCV valve to clear. Boom, there we go. Now we can pull these out. Now before I get any further, I gotta replace this eccentric shaft sensor. No way, dude. They sent me the wrong eccentric shaft sensor. That's such a bummer. I'm not gonna be able to replace it. This one has 4 bolts. This other one's supposed to have 3. I looked it up by vehicle, but I got the wrong sensor, so we're not doing the eccentric shaft sensor today. And we'll just keep an eye on this connector. We'll spray it out and clean it real well. And yeah, we're just gonna have to monitor it. That's a bit of a bummer. All right, now I'm gonna take a clean rag and just wipe off the entire gasket surface. Okay, now I got some red Scotch-Brite with some brake cleaner on it. For some of these tight to reach spots, like around these dowel pins, I like to take a flat head screwdriver with my Scotch-Brite. And you can sort of get a little fine pressure and get into some of those little tighter to reach spots. Little brake cleaner on the rag, wipe off any Scotch-Brite dust, get all the oils off of the surface. All right, now we're just gonna start working on cleaning this exterior surface. All right, final wipe down. We are all scrubbed up. Tuck that PCV out and she is ready. Now before we install it, I'm gonna put a little bit of Seal Glide right on the back side of that eccentric shaft sensor seal, just so it doesn't grab. And also just press down on the gasket surface the entire way around, just to make sure gasket is fully seated and it looks good and straight. Ah, yes. That's a good starting point right there. Well, let's go back with the pry bar. There we go. All right, now we need to get this thing centered. like that. Now before I tighten anything up, I'm using a flashlight and an inspection mirror. And I'm gonna come down and look for the gasket on every single surface of the valve cover. I'm gonna check and just make sure the valve cover gasket didn't pop out. Everything looks good. I can see gasket everywhere. Okay, I'm gonna start with the center. Makes logical sense. Drop these 2 steel bolts down in those holes. And now I'm just gonna sort of do a star pattern. Okay, now we'll hit some of the trickier ones and throw our wobble socket on for some of these rears. Electronic torque wrench. 9 Newton meters. It says it right here, 8.6 plus or minus 0.6 Newton meters. 9's a good number. Come on, don't act up on me today. I'm gonna go put some new batteries in this thing. Well, gang, the torque wrench is just busted. I think she's seen her last day. I'm gonna try to make it work, but if I can't, I'm gonna torque this thing by hand. I've done it before, I'm gonna do it again, but I try to torque everything for you guys. All right, next, let's put this eccentric shaft sensor seal back in. Just gonna use my tiny hamster and a little brass punch. Valvetronic motors going back in. Just get her lined up like that. And then the bottom bolt to secure it. Snug these down. Okay, let's get this expansion tank back to its home. Don't wanna hurt it. Okay, next we can put these spark plug tubes back in. Then I just take a flathead screwdriver and just pop them. There we go. Can plug our PCV valve back in, our hose to the breather. Let's flop this harness back down. Those O2s stay there. All right, and then from here, we can get our harness back into these clip locations. There, there, there. Ground strap goes there. Ground strap goes there. Little 8mm nuts. I like to just get them started with a little magnet like this. Okay, ignition coils. I like to connect them up top, get them lined up, and then bop them down. Some electronics cleaner in there, in the plug for the eccentric. Valvetronic motor. Swap over our little gasket, oil cap, arrow lines up with the arrow for installation. Okay, fuel injector harness. Click, click. All in. O2s. Black one goes to the front of the car, gray one goes to the back. And then this goes through here. Okay, then for this harness. Cover comes off for you. Little guy goes there. Goes tight. You go here. And you come across. You go there. All right, what else we missing? Expansion tank clips back in. E-box cover goes back on. Now we can smoke this thing. Rechecking her with smoke, no leaks. Plenty of pressure at the cap. We are sealed up tight. All right, I threw the strut brace back on. Everything's all plugged in. Airbox is back in. Let's fire this girl up. Sounds good. We're gonna have a SOS malfunction, but that's nothing. Everything else is fixed. Bulb warnings, service indicators, check engine light. Let's go inspect the front end and start putting this thing back together. She's running really smooth. Belt looks good. Oh, you know what? We dropped the rubber schnubber. We gotta take the airbox back out. All right, I busted the bolts loose and I was able to sneak it back in. All right, let's fire this thing back up. I'm gonna let it run while I put the engine bay back together. I like to leave the engine running as I do the microfilter and the engine cover and all that stuff, because then I'm just able to look around and sort of monitor and see how things are doing. Now I'm just gonna give it a quick spit shine with some trim shine. We are officially done. All right, let's go test drive this girl. It's raining outside. All right, we'll go do a highway pull. Oh yeah, she is shifting beautifully. This car really feels like 66,000 miles. Oh yeah, baby. N52 is great. It's a great engine. I don't care what anybody says. It's one of the most reliable, easy to maintain BMW engines that there is out there. All right, let's go. Test drive secured. I'm gonna give Ed a call tonight, see if he wants to come down tomorrow, pick this pig up. See you guys then.
The next day.
I almost forgot. You guys probably want to see the manometer readings from the old valve cover to the new one. Let's go take a look. 31, just about between 30 to 32 millibar. Much less vacuum at the cap too. Noticeably less.
It looks sweet.
Yeah, you know, a nice little budget detail for you. Trunk switch is working right now, which is nice.
Wow. You do remarkable work.
She's running great. And if you take a look down here, your daytime running lamp is back.
Oh, beautiful. All right.
But yeah, other than that, I think that just about covers it. Oil service, we reset the brake flush indicator because that was done 2 years ago. Microfilter, air filter, coolant work, valve cover, power steering flush, bulb fix, windshield washer reservoir fix. We're in really good shape.
Yeah, that is better than good. Look at that.
Perfect
Okay.
fit. Other
All
than
right.
that, let's grab that epoxy, see if we can throw a quick glue up on that
Very
rod
good.
holder of yours. And then let's do a key swap real quick too. I got that with your missing valet key, and you can just plug your keychain back into there.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough, Alex. This is sweet.
I can't thank you enough, Ed.
Yeah.
Thanks for your support.
It's going to be a different drive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be driving great for you though. All right, Ed, keep in touch. Let me know if anything comes up. Thanks again. Great to see ya. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be in touch, okay?
Yeah.
All right. All right, gang, that is a wrap. It was so fun to make this video with Ed. He is such a good human being. Really appreciate being able to get to know him a little bit more. If you guys are still hanging around this far in the video, you are the real MVPs. And I want to ask you a favor. If you wouldn't mind just dropping a comment down below and just saying, thank you for your service, Ed. I'm going to be sending this video to him. He was a member of our US Navy. And I always just like to make sure that our service members here in the United States are seen and appreciated. And I would really love your guys' support. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel if you have not done that already. I hope you enjoyed, or I hope you learned something new. And as always, folks, I'll see you on my next day off. Cheers.